That's how you know. Okay, so how did chemistry first become a science? Well, first off, we had to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. So some people were obviously died in the whole transition of doing this. But when you think of pre-chemistry or alchemy, this guy should pop up in your head. Now Hollywood has taken some of these kind of ideas like Gandalf and Harry Potter and things like that, and they've kind of blown it up a little bit. But honestly, that's not just a myth. Some of these people did exist. I'm not saying Gandalf did. But they had to start somewhere. And not all of them had the whole stereotype with the pointy hat and the beard and all that kind of stuff, but they did like their robes. So the alchemists that we're going to look at, or there are two alchemists we're going to mainly talk about that are very popular. I'll try to associate them with some movies so you have an idea. But mainly, one of the main things that when you hear the word alchemist, you should think of one of two things. You should think of how to take something very cheap and turn it into something very valuable. And that was actually one of the main things alchemists were credited for. The alchemist's dream was mainly be able to take something cheap at the time, copper, and actually turn it into something valuable like gold. You can actually do this experiment. It's not really hard to do. It looks silver and it looks gold, but in reality, what we can do is just coat the penny with zinc to make it look silver, and then tan it to make it look like gold. And is it really gold though? Oh, no. No, it just looks like it. Back in so those little magicians or alchemists and things around the medieval times, the king was not very knowledgeable about these things. So the alchemist could fool the king as many times as he wanted. So he'd do little tricks like this just to mess with him. Well, not just to mess with him, but to keep him from, because kings had very bad short tempers, and he didn't want to end up on a spike or something. So anyway, back a little bit of history. Zinc pennies actually came to be about 1982. All before then, they used to be pure copper, which is kind of weird when you think about it, because nowadays copper is very valuable, and get your hands on it, just pretty good price range. But now they're mostly brass with a zinc core. And so about 1982, and you can actually measure pennies before 1982 and actually see the difference between modern day ones and now. They're actually about 0.5 to 0.8 grams lighter. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But where are we at? Okay, so common differences between alchemist and chemist. You can look up there right now and you can see two things. Besides their clothes, nowadays, what do we use when we're investigating scientific activities? What method?
Scientific method.
The scientific method. Well, there's the process, the purpose, the hypothesis, yada, yada, yada. But what did they use? Telescope. What? Something different. Well, let's think. Before coming up with scientific method, what do you think you would use? Trial and error. So in other words, what does this do? You never know. So when they did a lot of trial and error, so obviously people are going to die when you're doing trial and error. But this also came up with some other kind of things. There was not an application in the village at the time to be the alchemist. Okay, these guys were other jobs beforehand. 3 other jobs. Take a guess. Think of medieval times. Think of jobs. One is a blacksmith. Okay. I don't know about a knight. They could. I'm saying they couldn't, but that kind of goes on with the blacksmith. But a blacksmith is one of the ones. Not a tailor. Oh, say again? Baker or cooks or chefs. So they are actually one of the main ones. The cook became the alchemist. They were actually just mixing things together. One more. We got 2 of the good ones. Those are the ones people usually forget about. A what? Teacher could, but they really, I don't know if they actually, how they did their education at that time, which is kind of interesting, because you ever watch a movie, they don't have really a teacher. Stagecoach driver? Yes, I'm sure they had that. What about the physician? Yeah. Most people, the doctor or the physician, they called him the physician at the time. I know what because doctor meant other things. But yeah, they were the ones that also mainly experimented on people. They tried to find a way, and one time or another, they used to do something called bloodletting. Some people still do it today. But they used to believe that if you were sick, it was because your blood was bad. And what would they do?
They just cut and let themselves bleed.
They'd cut you and let you bleed. And then they eventually found out that, hey, you need your blood. But they would do this back in around King Henry VIII and things like that. They would bleed the king because they thought that would get rid of the problem. Okay, so first thing you need to write down is this guy. He is your first guy. He is one of the two alchemists we're going to talk about. He is not very popular. He does have a kind of a more pessimistic kind of story, but that's just through some research that's been looked up. He had many jobs. He was a very big investigator, but not like the investigator like for crimes. He mainly investigated, I want to say chemistry, but mostly the alchemy of everything. He believed that the man consisted of three things: salt, sulfur, and mercury. And each one represented parts of the body. But you got to think, yeah, that sounds weird today, but at that time, they didn't know some of these things. It's a pretty good idea. At least he's thinking about things. But he thought he could rearrange these amounts and change man, probably change your identity, but mostly want to be able to make you live longer. So two of the main things alchemists wanted. One, they wanted wealth, because let's be honest, one of the problems in your life is money. We got to have money to buy things. So, well, if you can make gold, you got that problem taken care of. So then that leaves the second thing. If you have all the money in the world, you can pretty much buy whatever you want. You have power. But there's one thing that you can't stop, and that is death. So they wanted to stop death. They want to live forever and have all the money. That's the two main things pretty much everybody wants. Okay, so this guy actually has a longer name. That is his nickname at the top, Paracelsus. Have y'all ever watched the movie 9?
9 what?
No, just 9. It's a little puppet movie that has Elijah Wood as the voice. It's like a little...
Is it like, it's like a 9 green kind of, it's like blue?
green, is it... Are they green? They have like green...
No, like the name of it is like green.
Yes. It's literally just the number 9. Yeah. But in that movie, let me see how this compares to this. I don't know if you noticed this, but after I did this, I watched that movie and I was like, huh. If you actually look closely in the movie, the scientist guy that's splitting his soul into putting them into the puppets, that's him. He's actually an alchemist. If you actually look, you'll see some alchemy symbols here later. So the second guy that you need to write down is Nicholas Flamel. Okay, yes, it's spelled without an H. So Nicholas Flamel is about 1330s, but this guy actually comes along with the story. If you read Harry Potter or if you watch the movies, the very first one, this is the guy they're talking about. Okay, he has a better story, a kinder story. Obviously, it goes along with the Philosopher's Stone or the Sorcerer's Stone, depending on which, if you're reading the American versus the English version. But basically, the same thing they did in the book actually goes along with the legend that is currently there. He believed that he was linked to the myth of the Philosopher's Stone, which was able to turn metal into gold, and also create the elixir of life. So he had both of those, and he was actually a very kind person. So he has a more happy story. However, in France, and you can go visit his gravesite, I mean, these two people did exist, by the way. There's just some myths linked to them. Just like Dracula existed, but they linked the whole vampire thing to him. Or that Vladimir the Impaler, that guy. So his gravesite is empty in France, which is what really kind of sparked the myth. And you could go visit it and all this kind of stuff, but that's what makes people think like he's walking around, even today. It's just a funny little myth. Yeah. All right. So some things. This would be good to write down. So you got the two alchemists, and now we're going to talk about some of the first elements that believe that were there. This is where the whole some of y'all's modern stuff y'all play or cartoons you watch actually pull from a lot of this, and it's been around for a long time. But they believed that there are 4 basic elements, okay? The earth, air, wind, fire, all that kind of stuff. Or earth, air, fire, water, I'm sorry. What was that? The name of the group is Earth, Air, and Earth, Air, Wind, Fire? Earth. Not Avatar. I'm talking about the group. There's a Earth, Wind, and Fire. Thank you. That sounded better. But with all these, this is where actually a lot of they believe that everything was made of these 4 elements. But you got to think this is ancient history. So ancient times, that's what they thought. And it's funny though, every culture had a reference to this. They didn't get it from one culture. They all developed it themselves. And it just so happened to sync up, which is very interesting when you think about it. This obviously gets into the mythology and their gods and all this other kind of stuff. But some of the practical beginnings of chemistry, household goods, common household goods that you have in your house, like bleach and ammonia and things like that to help clean things. Obviously, do not mix the 2 together. Weapons. We needed weapons. That's how you win wars. Soap. I'm going to talk about the fun soap making time here. Wine was a big trade, especially amongst different other cultures. Basic medicine. We got basic medicine also from, well, fermenting certain things and herbs and stuff like that. So, let me talk about soap. Let's talk about soap. This is fun. Because it has to do with human sacrifice. Before I get off on the Greek mythology, we're going to come back to South America. And we're going to talk about the Mayans. What was different with their culture versus some others?
I was a stretch. My answer was Jesus.
Yep. Okay. Okay, I got you. Okay, so the difference in their culture, they really, really like to do human sacrifice. Okay, that's where a lot of the whole human sacrifices come from. So what they would do, you've seen their little pyramid kind of things. It looks like a stump, or it's actually like a trapezoid. But anyway, let's do it. Let's do the bottom one. But it's a lot like a pyramid, but it has like a flat top. But anyway, up here is where they would have the altar, and this is where they would sacrifice, people. Well, here's the thing: you did not want to be a king or a queen, or in that culture, because they looked at you as if you were a god trapped in a human form. We got to get you out of that human form. So how do you think they release you from your human form? Kill them or chop them a little bit. What's the other one? What's the one that's a little bit more painful?
Burn them.
Chopping his head off is actually quick and easy, but burn them alive. Here's the thing. When they burned you alive and you screamed, they thought that was your godliness escaping. Oh, before. So how they would do this, before they lit you on fire, there was a ritual. Okay, so they take both the god king and the woman, and they treat them, they feed them great, they bathe them and all this other kind of stuff, and well, they get them up to the altar, and then they start with the woman. Okay, you know what a stingray tail looks like? Yeah. It has barbs on it like this. No, not beat them. Not bad though. They would, it's very sharp and it has barbs on it. It's because when it sticks in, it's supposed to rip back out, right? Okay. They would take this side, the jagged edge, pull her tongue and run it through. Jagged edge down. They would collect the blood when they did this. She got off easy compared to the guy. They did the same thing to the guy, but not with his tongue.
You're lying.
No, not lying at all. So they'd still be alive at this time. They would not be dead or passed out from the shock. So then they would tie them to the altar and then burn them. Okay? Y'all okay now? I don't know why they would do that to the guy. It's, but anyway, hold on one second. So think about this. Where would civilizations like to settle? What would you need to survive? Water. Okay. Shelter too. So they could build outside, but they mainly would you have to have a water source. So they would probably be right by a river, okay, or some kind of stream or something. Okay. Well, they burn them first. So they burn everything. Well, what happens when you burn it? You're left with what? Ash. Black powdery stuff. Well, also your fat will melt off too, okay? So when it would rain, they would leave them up there, and I bet that would smell pretty good. And then it would wash down into the river and eventually downstream. What would then happen is when people would go bathe, they found out that if they bathed down here, they got cleaner than up here. And then they started thinking like, well, what's giving us all the nice little suds and everything to clean ourselves with? It was the fat from the human corpses. It's pretty bad.
How'd they figure that out though? How'd they figure out that it was fat and everything?
Well, it took fat and the ash that was mixed between the two, and that's how they started getting the idea of getting the fat and actually getting suds and washing things clean. And so that's how soap started coming up.
So like when you said the fat would melt off of you, like would it like just fall on the ground right there in front of you? And
Probably, but when you heat up fat, it's a lot like heating up bacon grease. It liquefies, and so it'll flow better.
So you could tell it apart.
Yeah. If you ever grilled or smoked meat, you know what I'm talking about. Or eat a steak, you know what I'm talking about. It's the fat is the good part. It's bad for you, but it's delicious. Okay, so anyway, that's my one culture shock for things. I learned that in history class, so that was fun. So anyway, moving on to the 4 basic elements that we have right here. The earth, air, fire, and water. Again, now, do you see these 4 guys on the current periodic table?
No.
No, they're not on there. You would think they are, but they're not. Each one is a Greek letter or a Greek symbol that they actually used. Not just the Greeks had this philosophy, other cultures did too, like the Egyptians and Norse and all. Well, the Greeks are credited for a lot of stuff because of Rome, and they're not Rome and Greek are different, but they're similar. But anyway, this gets us back to how they actually symbolize these was with this. This is where they actually thought most of their gods came from. Okay, like the Titans and everything. And you're going to see a lot of stuff in science class relate back to the names and the stories behind a lot of the things. So, for example, if you've taken mythology, you know that Titans. There was 2 Titans before all the others, before Zeus and all that. The 2 Titans were Gaia and the other guy, which had a planet named after him. They all actually, this planet you're on right now is called Gaia, but we call it Earth. Who was in charge of the sky? So you got the ground and you got the sky. Before Zeus, there was a Titan called Uranus, and that's how you pronunciate it. Nowadays, you call him Uranus. Go ahead and laugh. Get it out of your system. It's okay. Originally, it's spelled or, but they changed it to U, and you know, it's just how the Romans and the Greeks got things. But both represent, obviously, this is the male, this is the female symbol. And so they had their first kid, which is the one the whole stories are based around, is Kronos, who is the Titan of time. So you have 3 things then. You have space, you have matter, space, and then time. And that's actually how they explain some of their science behind things. Obviously, there's always opposites between each one. Earth, air, fire, water. There's always a cause and effect or an opposite between each one. Obviously, after a while, if you know the mythology, Kronos was eventually overthrown by Zeus. And there's weird stories about them, feeding him a rock and stuff like that. And this isn't mythology, so I'm not going to go too much into it. Y'all don't have to write this down, but this does give you an idea of the time frame we're talking about. We're all in the ADs here. Yes, a lot of things were done in the BC, but in the ADs is where mainly the alchemy period was. Transmutation, the definition is to change from one substance to another. In other words, take one thing and turn it to something completely different. It's mutating, transmutating. It does not happen. This is actually the whole myth of turning lead to gold or copper to gold or whatever. That's basically what they were talking about. You can't do it, so don't try. Now, some people, one person last block asked me, well, can't you do what was it called? What about nuclear radiation and things like that, or isotopes breaking down? It's like, isn't that transmutating? It's like, that's a nuclear reaction. That's not transmutating. So for example, when we take uranium, it breaks down into other elements because the atoms are split. We'll go more into that much later because 2 units from now, y'all will be doing some nuclear chemistry. Very little, but we got to talk about it. Don't really have to know too much about this because we're going to cover it more. This is actually in the Unit 1 notes, but it's good to bring up now. We figured out that the ancient elements are not elements because we define the element, or Robert Boyle defined the element as something that cannot be broken down any further. So in other words, once you break it down to the smallest thing, that is an element.
Can you
okay?
break down water more than it is?
Yeah. Water it's two things.
Oxygen.
Oxygen and hydrogen. So you can break it down to get those two. So that's why water could not be an element. But it is a compound. Air is composed of not just oxygen, but it has many other things. You got CO2. You even have a little bit of water in the air there. Nitrogen and some noble gases. So there's many composite of the air. So yeah, good luck there. You could write some of them down if you want, but they're never going to be on the test. But a lot of the stuff from, and this is where I think a lot of the Harry Potter stuff you might see is actually pulled from, is the alchemy stuff. I don't know, a student last year picked this up and said this looked like the snitch, the little golden stitch. And they kind of look like they combined some things. That's where they probably got some of the ideas from. But you see, they obviously labeled certain things by the way they looked. I think that's a banana. I don't know, but I assume that's for potassium.
Looks like a heart right there to your left.
Yeah. So all these guys that you see, this is how they made some of this stuff. But also, they kind of made it similar to the Greek letters. Okay. Now, all this is written in Greek. Can anybody read that?
Nope.
That is an A for alpha.
Okay.
Alpha, gamma. Oh, I'm sorry, lambda, I think. Yeah, I said gamma earlier. That's lambda. So alpha, lambda, chi. I forget what that one is. But you can kind of see how it does mix with the English language. X is chi, which makes a k sound, okay? Or not a chai. So as you kind of can see some of those, the E up there, that's the symbol for sigma, which is for the letter S. And then you see the beta, that's for B. So you can kind of see how this goes into our English language. You want me to do it again? I'll do it again. Whee! There you go. Congratulations, you can read Greek now. So a lot of the Greek actually, it's not hard to read Greek. It just takes a little bit of practice, just like any other language. Speaking is another thing. Reading it is another thing. So other symbols actually popped up at certain times. They would actually represent gold by a full circle because obviously it looked like the sun. And they thought silver, well, we're going to use that symbol as the moon because the moon looks like what? Silver. And so gold looked like the sun. So they actually thought the sun was made of complete gold. They're not wrong. There is gold in the sun, but it's not completely gold. Alchemy was practiced in many regions, including China and Middle East. I don't think just the Greeks are given a lot of credit, but they're not the only ones. Alchemy has arrived in Western Europe around 500 BC. I'm sorry, AD. AD. Sorry, blah. It always messes me up when they do that.
What does CE stand for?
Common Era. It's AD. But this is the last little thing you got to write down. So the contributions that we got from these guys. Obviously, we got our methods in. We developed the scientific method to keep us from, to be able to track things down. Every bit of technology and things that we've done has come back to research. And we are currently researching now to develop better techniques, to make better phones, to make, well, I mean, better medicine, anything out there. So we got a lot of things from the lab apparatus, which is kind of like what you see here, how to distill things. That's actually very, very useful so that you can actually have purified water. Procedures we got from experimental techniques. We mainly also learn about a lot of different alloys, how to get pure metals. And that's how we've kind of modernized a lot of this kind of stuff.